What would you do if your mother simply vanished in the middle of the night? No warning, no note, nothing. Just silence where her presence once was. Imagine the panic, the disbelief, the gnawing fear in your gut that something unimaginable has happened. This is exactly the nightmare that Savannah Guthrie, the acclaimed Today Show host, has been forced to live through in recent days. Her mother, Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old and in fragile health, disappeared from her home in Arizona on the evening of January 31st, and what was initially thought to be a worrying absence has now escalated into a full-blown investigation classified as a crime scene. The details are chilling, the questions relentless, and the stakes terrifyingly high. And Savannah, who normally brings stories to the public, now finds herself living the story she never could have imagined. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Nancy Guthrie was last seen at her home near East Skyline Drive and North Campbell Avenue at around 9:30 p.m. on that fateful evening. From all reports, it was a quiet, ordinary night. But ordinary nights often mask extraordinary danger. When family members realized she hadn't been seen for hours, their concern turned into alarm. The first call to 911 came around noon the next day, and what authorities discovered upon arrival changed everything. The house, which should have been a sanctuary, was immediately treated as a potential crime scene. Signs pointed toward the chilling reality that Nancy Guthrie may have been taken against her will. It was no longer just a missing person case. It was now a possible abduction, a scenario that every parent, every child, fears but prays they never have to face. Savannah Guthrie's response to the disappearance has been both public and deeply personal. On February 2nd, just 2 days after her mother went missing, Savannah took to Instagram with a post that immediately captured the world's attention. "We believe in prayer. We believe in voices raised in unison, in love and hope. We believe in goodness," she wrote, her words both a plea and a mantra. She continued, thanking the public for lifting their prayers alongside the families. Her tone was heartfelt, urgent, and imbued with a sense of desperation. She quoted Isaiah 26 verse 3, "He will keep in perfect peace those whose hearts are steadfast, trusting in the Lord." And she concluded with a short, piercing line, "Bring her home." The simplicity of that plea, 3 words that carry the weight of fear, hope, and faith, resonated with thousands. It was a call not just for help but for action, a reminder that even in a world saturated with news and tragedy, human life is sacred and irreplaceable. But beyond the social media posts and public appeals lies the sobering reality of Nancy's condition. She is 84, suffers from physical ailments, and requires medication that, if not taken within a narrow time frame, could have catastrophic consequences. Authorities have emphasized that she is of sound mind, meaning she did not simply wander away voluntarily. She was in her home, vulnerable, and suddenly gone. Sheriff Chris Nanos, speaking at a press conference, stated that investigators now believe a crime occurred and that the house itself is being treated more as a crime scene than merely a site for a search operation. This revelation has raised profound questions about safety, trust, and the unknown forces at play in what might have been an ordinary neighborhood. The first hours of an abduction or disappearance are always critical, and in this case, the initial response was swift but tense. Investigators have been meticulously combing through the evidence, surveillance footage, license plate readers, witness interviews, and the immediate physical environment of the home. They are piecing together a timeline, searching for the faintest hint of what might have happened to Nancy Guthrie in the hours between her last known sighting and the moment she was reported missing. And while every lead is scrutinized, the public and the family alike are left grappling with the horrifying possibilities. Was this a random crime of opportunity, a targeted abduction, or something even more sinister? The emotional toll on Savannah Guthrie cannot be overstated. This is a woman who has built a career around composure, poise, and delivering information with clarity and authority. And yet, in these moments, she is not the journalist, she is the daughter. She is someone whose world has been upended, whose most primal fears have been realized, and whose life has become a waiting game filled with uncertainty. She has been sharing her vulnerability with the public, offering a rare glimpse of grief and hope entwined. Every post, every message, is an attempt to rally not just support, but collective belief that Nancy will be found. She is navigating the delicate line between public figure and private pain, showing us all what it means to fight with every fiber of one's being when a loved one's life is at stake. And yet, despite the urgency, despite the public outpouring of support and prayers, the investigation has taken a starkly serious turn. Sheriff Nanos made clear that Nancy Guthrie did not leave of her own volition, that she has physical limitations, and that time is critical. In fact, he stated, this is an 84-year-old lady who suffers from some physical ailments, has some physical challenges, is in need of medication that, if she doesn't have in 24 hours, it could be fatal. The clock is ticking, the pressure is immense, and the stakes could not be higher. Every moment Nancy is missing increases the risk to her health, and every lead that investigators follow could be the difference between life and death. But this story isn't just about missing person statistics, police reports, or news headlines. It's a deeply human story about fear, hope, and the lengths to which we go to protect those we love. It's about a daughter speaking out when the world seems to have gone silent, about communities coming together in prayer and action, and about the terrifying realization that even in our own homes, we are not always safe. And as investigators continue their work, scouring every corner of Nancy's life, every detail becomes a potential clue, every unanswered question a source of tension. Who could have done this? Why? And most importantly, will Nancy Guthrie be brought home safely? We don't yet know the answers. What we do know is that the world is watching. Savannah's plea, the sheriff's statements, the ongoing investigation, all of it forms a mosaic of urgency, uncertainty, and profound emotional stakes. Each passing hour is a reminder that life is fragile and that even those who seem untouchable in their public lives are vulnerable when danger strikes close to home. As we prepare to dive deeper into the story, we will explore the details that have emerged so far. The timeline of the disappearance, the investigation that has unfolded, the family's perspective, the community's response, and the emotional weight carried by Savannah as she navigates this unimaginable crisis. This story is far from over, and as we unravel it together, we will encounter moments of hope, tension, fear, and revelation. We will question what we know about safety, trust, and the human capacity for resilience. And we will do so alongside Savannah Guthrie, who has turned to the public not just for information, but for faith, for hope, and for collective action. The clock is ticking. Nancy Guthrie remains missing, and the next twist in this unfolding story could change everything. But what comes next is even more shocking. Details that the family and investigators have only begun to uncover, and revelations that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about that night, that house, and that disappearance. This is just the beginning, and the story is only getting darker, stranger, and more urgent. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What really happened on that quiet night in Arizona? Was it an ordinary evening that suddenly turned into a nightmare? Or was there something more sinister lurking in the shadows of Nancy Guthrie's home? The answers, at least initially, were far from clear, and every moment that passed without news only amplified the fear. On January 31st, Nancy's house on East Skyline Drive should have been calm. The streets were quiet, the neighborhood familiar and safe, or so it seemed. At 9:30 p.m., she was last seen moving through her home, a place she had lived for decades, surrounded by the comfort of her belongings, her memories, her routines. Friends and family remember her tending to small tasks that night, nothing out of the ordinary. She had dinner, perhaps checked her mail, maybe even watched a familiar TV program. These details seem almost mundane, but they make the sudden absence all the more alarming. One moment she was there, the next, she was gone. Nancy Guthrie wasn't just elderly, she was fragile. Her physical ailments and need for daily medication meant she was vulnerable in ways that many of us might not immediately consider. She had carefully maintained her independence, but this independence also made her susceptible. She wasn't someone who could simply disappear unnoticed, nor would she have wanted to. Investigators quickly noted that her disappearance wasn't voluntary. She was of sound mind, fully aware of her surroundings. Yet something or someone took her from the familiar sanctuary of her home. And this is where the terror begins, the idea that safety, even in one's own home, is never guaranteed. Family members were the first to realize something was wrong. The initial hours are always the most critical in a disappearance, and in this case, those hours were agonizing. Calls went unanswered. The house, once a place of warmth and security, became a cage of uncertainty. Panic started to set in. Had she fallen? Had she wandered off? Or worse, had someone entered the home with malicious intent? The questions were relentless, and the answers seemed impossibly distant. When the 911 call finally came, the situation escalated immediately. The Pima County Sheriff's Department responded swiftly, yet what they found only heightened the concern. Nancy's house was quiet, but showed subtle signs that something was amiss. Investigators began treating it as a crime scene, not simply as the residence of a missing elderly woman. For law enforcement, the focus was no longer on hoping for a safe return through passive searching. It was about uncovering evidence that could point to an abduction or foul play. Every corner, every room, every detail mattered. The smallest clue could hold the key to understanding what had happened that night. As the investigation unfolded, Sheriff Chris Nanos shared harrowing details. He described the situation with urgency and gravity, emphasizing that Nancy required medication critical to her survival. Time, in this case, was more than a constraint. It was a potential matter of life and death. An 84-year-old woman, taken from the comfort of her home in the middle of the night, facing both the unknown and the looming risk of medical complications. It was a scenario that sent shockwaves not just through her family, but through the entire community. The timeline quickly became a focal point. Authorities worked to reconstruct the moments leading up to Nancy's disappearance. Who had seen her last? What had she been doing in the hours before she vanished? Every detail mattered. Surveillance footage from nearby homes and traffic cameras became essential tools. Witness statements, no matter how minor, were meticulously collected and scrutinized. Investigators sought patterns, anomalies, anything that could indicate whether this was a premeditated act, a crime of opportunity, or something else entirely. But while law enforcement pieced together facts, the emotional toll on the family intensified. Savannah Guthrie, normally composed on live television, faced the unbearable reality of watching her mother vanish without explanation. Friends and neighbors reported hearing the fear in her voice during private conversations, glimpses of vulnerability that the public rarely sees. Savannah's professional life had always demanded clarity, poise, and certainty. Now, in her personal life, she was confronted with chaos, uncertainty, and a creeping fear that time was running out. Even as investigators pursued evidence, the mystery deepened. Nancy Guthrie did not leave her home voluntarily, yet there was no immediate sign of forced entry. No struggle was evident to casual observers. Could someone have known her routines? Could the disappearance have been orchestrated with planning and precision? The questions multiplied, and each answer seemed to reveal yet another layer of complexity. For the family, every knock on the door or phone call became a potential revelation or another heartbreak. Neighbors who had once seen Nancy in her garden or walking her small dog began to replay every interaction in their minds. Did they notice anything unusual? A stranger lurking near the house? A car parked in the driveway at odd hours? These small details, initially dismissed as mundane, now took on profound significance. In cases like this, even the smallest observation can be the clue that changes everything. Meanwhile, the clock ticked relentlessly. Nancy's medications were a constant concern. Authorities emphasized that without access to her prescribed treatment, her condition could deteriorate rapidly. The fear was no longer abstract. It was tangible, pressing, and immediate. Every passing hour increased the urgency of the search and the weight of despair on the family's shoulders. Savannah, through her public statements, tried to channel hope and faith into action. Yet beneath the polished statements and composed posts lay a daughter grappling with one of life's most terrifying uncertainties, the disappearance of her parent. Questions plagued investigators as well as the public. Had this been a random act, the work of someone desperate or cruel? Or was it targeted, someone with knowledge of Nancy's routines and vulnerabilities? Investigators didn't rule anything out. Each scenario carried its own implications, each clue its own weight. Surveillance footage was painstakingly reviewed. Every license plate passing near the home in the crucial hours was tracked. Witnesses were interviewed multiple times to confirm or clarify statements. It was meticulous work, but in situations where every minute mattered, it was the only approach that could offer hope of resolution. And while the investigation moved forward, one question remained foremost in everyone's mind. Who could do this to an 84-year-old woman, and why? The answers were elusive, but the implications were profound. The family's worst fears were no longer abstract. They were real, immediate, and terrifying. And as the search continued, investigators and loved ones alike knew that what came next could redefine everything they thought they knew about that night, that home, and that disappearance. But what investigators uncovered in the hours following the initial search would change everything, and no one saw it coming.